All right. Well, thank you for all you've assembled today to hear about fire weather and the related business opportunities. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Andrew Rose, and I am a partner and founder of Superstruct, and we are a different type of consulting company. We only work with companies, or we prefer to work with companies that benefit our species 3 generations from now. But that is not necessarily the topic at hand today. The topic at hand today is a fun and timely topic. So let me give you a little background about what it is that I do and why this topic fascinates me so much. And the other piece too, I'm just going to mute everyone here. Should you have a question while we're going through this, please put that in the chat box. And because we're mostly friends here, if someone sees a question that's unanswered, raise your hand or kick me in the side, and I will go ahead and respond to that question or comment or what have you. So I first got interested in, it was flash droughts rather than fire weather. I was at a crop insurance presentation back in 2016, and the speaker was talking about all the risk management that goes into growing crops to feed cows. And one of the things he said in a sentence was the words flash drought. And I thought he had misspoken. I had never heard, at that point in time, never heard of a flash drought. I've heard of flash floods. And so I started doing a little research, and sure enough, the term flash drought had been established back in, I believe, the 90s. And it was a thing, but given our climatology changes since then, it's becoming a more prevalent thing. And it was striking that the crop insurance folks realized that with a flash drought, an irrigated crop could be lost in a day. It's just, or 2 days. And if you lose a crop like soybeans or corn, you just don't get another crop the next week. You got to wait a whole year for that thing to come back. So this is a fairly significant change in the way that we describe what is going on. So this was 2016. So I kept it in the back of my mind. I kind of did a little bumping along. And then in 2019, there was a significant flash drought in the southeastern part of the United States. We lost a ton of crops. And the National Oceanography Atmospheric Association, NOAA, along with the Weather Service, started putting on a series of learning webinars to discuss crop insurance or discuss flash droughts. And if you remember back in that time, we were going into COVID 2019, 2020. So thank goodness our government said, why don't we make these open to the public? So people like Andrew, who are just really curious but have no meteorological background, can sit in these things. So I did. And so I've been sitting in these working groups since the inception of them. And one of the things that both aggravated me at the time, but now I appreciate what they did, was they spent almost a year trying to define what a flash drought was. Now where does it fit within the schema? Because everything needs a definition, because once we fix a word to something, now it has a certain meaning. So what they came up with after a year or so of chatting about it was a flash drought is simply the rapid onset or intensification of drought. It is set in motion by lower than normal rates of precipitation, so rainfall is not there, i.e. the East Coast right now, accompanied by abnormally high temperatures. Again, that's part of the equation. Winds, and most importantly, the radiation. So you think about the winds, there's a convective. When wind blows across water, it tends to evaporate it off. That's why you tend to feel colder if it's a humid day and it's windy, or if it's a dry day and it's windy. But anyway, all these changes then can rapidly alter a local climate. We will get into a little bit more of some of the definitions that because you're going to learn some words today that you could use in a sentence sometime, and you're going to sound super duper smart. But we'll discuss evaporation, transpiration, and the combination of the two. But the big piece, and this is coming back to the Weather Service, if not predicted and discovered early enough, the changes in the soil moisture that accompany a flash drought can cause extensive damage to agriculture, economies, and ecosystems. And I'm going to, later on, I'll share a bunch of links here. This next slide is the one that kind of got my attention. All right, advanced slides. Come on, mister, please take it. There we go. back before Elon Musk bought Twitter, it was a place for international meteorologists to get together and share information with each other. And I follow the wide breadth of climatologists, not only the traditional ones, but also the alarmist and the ones that are way out ahead in the bleeding edge. Ben is one that I really appreciated a lot. And then the New York Times covered global warming, and basically they said 2 degrees Celsius increase, we lose the Arctic. And once we've lost the Arctic, that's kind of when the global collapse begins. We were on a call last year, I think it was either last year or the year before, I think it was last year, when we brought together some of the futurists, the climatologists, and we basically the question was, how much longer can our species survive on the surface of the planet, given where changes are today, if we don't reduce our load on carbon? The most pessimistic gave us 12 to 15 years of survival. The most optimistic were maybe in that 20 to 40-year range. And that's why I put my point in the future at 66 years and work on 3 generations out. But think about it. If every human on the planet died today, just died, we still have 2,000 years of every year being hotter than the last baked into what we have right now. So it's almost incomprehensible that we're going to be able to avoid these things that are coming. The other piece too, and this is just an Andrew fun fact, if you think about the first great extinction that we had on this planet, it was the Archeans that were unable to survive in an oxygen-rich environment. Prior to the ability of the first Archean little creatures to transform chlorophyll and oxygen into energy, this was a hydrogen sulfide environment. These extremophiles are mostly an iron-based life form. They loved it. It was beautiful. That's why there's so much red dirt everywhere. Those little bodies and particles from these Archeans. But should the climate change progress in the way it is, the Earth has a built-in kill switch. And it's basically these hydrogen sulfide vents that open up in the bottom of the ocean, and they will reintroduce hydrogen sulfide into the atmosphere. It'll smother all of us oxygen-breathing animals and critters, and the Archeans get to come back. And, it's the old, the meek shall inherit the world. Those are probably the meekest folks, and they're clinging with their little teeny tiny fingernails to these vents under the ocean or in Yellowstone, places where there is no oxygen in an anaerobic environment where they thrive. So they're dreaming and hoping for that one day when they can come back and just take over the planet. So on that happy note, there's a few ways that we can start predicting or understanding where the next fire weather or flash drought might occur. And fire weather and flash drought are both interchangeable. The conditions are the same. The outcomes are a little bit different. Obviously, if everything burns up, it's a little bit different than everything just being dry. But my favorite tool was created by Dr. Mike Hobbins. And Thea and I have just talked to him, and me being a climatology fanboy, Dr. Hobbins is one of my favorites. So let's talk about what he has done. He has taken a multitude of satellite feeds, put them into a formula, and come up with something called EDDI. And let me back up a little bit. Dr. Hobbins, and this is another reason why I'm just so fascinated by him, his degree is in atmospheric fluidics. I mean, just think about that, the movement of air and moisture around the globe, almost like in a water type of pattern or wave type of pattern. That's what he studies. And for me, it's just a beautiful thing to think about, that sort of an earth, because sometimes we get so caught up in the microcosm of what we do, our daily tasks. He's thinking about the entire globe and just being able to visualize how everything spins around the planet. But it says there, you can read that yourself, what EDDI does. The one drawback, and Dr. Hobbins shared this with us, is the information that he gets to put into his formulas to do some of the analysis here. When he gets the data, it's already 4 years, or I'm sorry, 4 days old, and it comes with a 12-kilometer resolution. So it's not real tight on what he can do. He will be, fingers crossed, having access to data that's 7 minutes old, which with much higher resolution. And I'm sure Joe, who's on the call here representing TerraPulse, can appreciate how important it is to have precise data that is not old, so you can run your analysis there. Now, again, let's step back and think about global warming. We're not here to debate the cause of global warming. It's here, it's obvious. Anyone with a thermometer and walks outside can understand that things are warmer today than they were in the past. As the air warms, it increases the capacity to hold moisture. This is kind of basic science, but it not only can hold moisture, it can draw moisture. So whether it's a human being, whether it's a lake, a stream, a plant, it sucks that moisture out of them like a magnet would pull iron filings out of the ground. And when that happens, it can do it very, very rapidly. It's almost like a desiccation process. Additionally, the air, if it can hold more moisture, hold or draw the moisture out, it can hold more moisture and drop it at given times. And if you think about what happened here in the United States with Hurricane Helene and the devastation it caused to North Carolina and Tennessee, you'll understand what can happen when that deluge then drops all at once. Here is your word of the day. It's evapotranspiration. I love this word. It took me a little while to practice saying it just so it could roll off my tongue so easily. Evapotranspiration. So evapotranspiration is the combination of evaporation, which we all know, but transpiration, and that's basically the plant's sweat. And I think I've got a later slide of one of the satellite images. It was really eerie when I was on the webinar when they debuted this satellite imagery, and you could see before a flash drought occurred, the plants gave up the ghost. There were these giant clouds of moisture rising above the fields and just drifting off. And we knew that within 2 weeks, those plants would be dead because they gave up that ghost. It was both eerily beautiful and just tragic thinking about what the outcome was going to be. Rainfalls, evaporation, transpiration. The other piece too, as the air holds more moisture, our human bodies have been adapted to exist in a certain temperature variation. There's a high and a low that we can exist at. If the temperature exceeds 80 degrees at night when we're sleeping, our body does not have a chance to reset. If the temperature exceeds 120 degrees during the day, that's when our proteins in our bodies start turning into scrambled eggs. And it's kind of hard to unscramble an egg once it's been scrambled. So that's another piece you need to think about. But when you add humidity in there, so the additional moisture this air is holding, that decreases that temperature that it takes for our proteins to turn into scrambled eggs. And that's called the wet bulb effect. And it can be a temperature, I believe, as low as 80 to 90 degrees with an ambient humidity of 80 to 90%. And that will then cause human expiration. I'm going to pause here and just, what questions do you have for me, or did I speak too quickly, or what words would you like me to define? Hearing none, I shall proceed. Okay. This is the latest EDDI picture. And when I saw this, I emailed Dr. Hobbins. I said, this looks apocalyptic. This looks really, really scary. So this is not a drought map. This is just showing where the air is thirsty, where the air is going to start pulling moisture out at an extreme level before that a drought occurs. So, and keep in mind, this data is 4 days old as well. So that might have changed a little bit, but I'm sitting on the far end of this scale on the East Coast of the United States, and I'm looking outside right now at ground that hasn't tasted rain in over a month. It's just bone dry here, and any moisture that falls will evaporate. When the air gets thirsty like this, what they're finding is the snowpack in the mountains that people rely upon for water during the summer is evaporating before it melts, before it has a chance to sink into the ground. That's how thirsty the air is. And that's today. Play this timeline forward 10 years, and it will become more and more increasingly thirsty. And this, well, anyway, you guys can do the math and see what's going to happen next. This is a drought map of the United States too. So what we can do is overlay these two maps on top of each other, and you can see that this is where the air is thirsty. This is where it's already manifested itself. So spots from here to here that aren't red yet, we can anticipate them getting red. And then that, if you're doing the predictive fire weather, where the next fire is going to occur. This is a map that came from the drought monitor that the government uses. There's certain letters on there, and you might be able to squint and see the chart down there at the bottom, short term, long term, some are both. But basically, if you look at the United States, there's not a whole lot of area that doesn't have a drought of some sort on it right now. And then this is the one that when I spoke about fire weather back in July, people looked at it more as a novelty. They said, oh, it can't happen here on the East Coast. And I said, guys and ladies, not only can it happen, it's coming. We need to prepare for something like this. So this is the latest map for November. And you can see up here in the Northeast, we are right in the bullseye. And then if I'm going to go back to this other map here, if you overlay it, we can kind of predict where the next area is going to be. And I would imagine that we're going to see that sort of Texas, Oklahoma area light up as well with the fire weather potential. Joe, I don't know if you can communicate or not, if you're still walking around some leaf blowers, but could you comment a little bit on some of that data that we can get from these satellites that can help us and maybe some of the things that you've done to enhance that data?
Yeah, so let's see, the two questions. The first one on the satellite data, well, like just to preface it, my expertise is mostly in remotely sensing of the land surface. So occasionally we'll touch the climate data or the meteorological data, but like really the core competency is the vegetation, the water, the impervious surfaces, the temperature, surface temperature, things like that. Okay, so given that, there and also a lot of what I do is on the sort of the research end. So that said, there's a new satellite. It's experimental. It's actually technically not a satellite. It's bolted to the International Space Station. Called EcoStress. I'm funded by NASA. Well, not anymore. As of like the project just ended, but we're using EcoStress that makes maps of evapotranspiration. Right. So you've got it's mostly a temperature. Like it's mostly driven by temperature. And I can go into like how it does it, but
well, let me ask you this. I mean, just thinking about what you do and who you serve. Is there a way to add tree canopy health into our predictive fire weather maps?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So like, okay, like I'm on sort of like shaky ground on saying all the different like NOAA sensors that are available, but like, yeah, there's more sensors coming out every day, and it would just take a ton of time to talk about that. The surface monitoring, what we do, there are records of 30-meter resolution multispectral satellite data going back to 1984. And what TerraPulse does is one of the products that we produce is maps of tree cover every year. So for like forestry companies, we make it down to less than a year so that they can monitor harvests in different regions or whatnot. Biomass, the phenology of the trees, or phenology of the land surface. And then if we've got a map of trees, we can subset that and say, this is the phenology of the trees, right? Trees really don't change much in a drought. There are some species like tulip poplars and mulberry and things like that that are really sensitive, and they'll shed their leaves in a drought. Tropics, like the dry tropics, dry deciduous forest, they'll do it also. But for North America, like what we're showing, most of our trees are winter deciduous, daylight temperature. But what you can see in the evapotranspiration over the tree canopy is that it does drop when there's no water, right? Like there's just nothing for them to drink. And then we can take, there are good global records of wildfires going back to about 1999, 2000, down to the day. So we specialize in getting satellite imagery, raw satellite data, reflectance, backscatter, whatever, applying our machine learning, artificial intelligence, making maps of the predictors of things like wildfire. And then that gives us the right-hand side of the equation to feed the model. The left-hand side of the equation, we go back and get the historical fires. We both of those are produced as time series of maps. We overlay those two, and we can make a probabilistic prediction of wildfire risk. And wildfire risk is broken down into it's a high-dimensional concept. The standards I developed by the U.S. Forest Service, I think in like 2001. There's hazard, which is the probability of fire in a place and a time given the fuels and the topography. So topography is static. You just get a digital elevation map and you get the TerraPulse predictor variables. Now you can make a predictive surface of those data. Those data, actually, I just put a sample data set of those on Nomadic, and we can go into that later. But that's an app where people can just go and look at the different data sets that I'm compiling as many environmental data sets as I can, putting them on there. Really cheap subscriptions to pay the rent on for Jeff Bezos to buy another trip to space. And then, okay, back, sorry, this is sort of a braided stream. And then the other dimension of fire risk that is remotely sensible is danger. And that's when you drive into a national forest and you see the Smokey Bear sign. It says fire danger is high today. That is much more variable because it is the probability of fire given topography and fuels, vegetation, just like hazard, but it also incorporates weather, right? So if you want to make this complete combined index that's dynamic, spatially, high resolution, high temporal frequency, and all that, kind of the holy grail is a map of fire danger. And that's, probability of fire given fuels, topography, and weather. Topography is pretty easy. Fuels is, we're getting better at it all the time. Weather, we're getting better at it all the time. And it's all just a matter of the spatial resolution, the temporal resolution, and the latency. So as you said on your evapotranspiration or your EDDI maps, the data are 4 days old. We're even longer in a lot of our data sets. So the standard data sets that we use, the land surface community uses, are Landsat, which is 30-meter resolution going back to 1984. That's at like 8-day to 16-day resolution. It has really good cloud masking, so that's pretty good. The other one is Sentinel, coming from the European Space Agency. And there's a radar one which sees through clouds, which is really nice, about 20-meter resolution. And then there's a multispectral pair of them, some Sentinel 2A and B, that are combined every 4 to 5 days. So that's kind of what we're working with on the land surface component of this. And then the NOAA data, they're all like 1 kilometer. You might get them daily. There's a trade-off in sort of the information processing and the just the physics of remote sensing. You got to capture enough photons, and some things just shed a lot of photons and others don't. So you have a trade-off between the temporal resolution, the extent, the spatial resolution, the spatial extent, and how much information, signal and noise ratio. Okay, that was a lot, but hopefully
I love it.
Hopefully I covered, I just carpet bombed your question with.
No, man. I mean, we're co-geeks here. I mean, okay. I live with this stuff. I know Thea does too, and I'm going to call her on a little bit too because she's part of this deck as well. But thanks, Joe. I appreciate that. So I just pulled up the let me pull the next slide here. This is the Fire Information for Resource Management System, and it gives you an idea of what is happening right now, where all the fires are right now. And you can see there is an absolute overlay on all the maps we just showed. Where's the prediction going to be? Where the fire is right now? What's coming next? And where are they right now? It's as I've again being an armchair meteorologist and go through these things, I start layering the maps on top of each other. And now we can start saying, okay, conditions here are going to be like they are there in 1 week. So we can predict that this place here is going to get white hot. And a lot of emergency services utilize these tools and other private tools that they have to predict these. But everything I'm showing you here is freeware. It's available. Thank God our government is allowing us to take these satellite feeds and do what we will. So gloom and doom. We're half hour here. You've heard how, the world's burning. We're all going to die in 12 years. What are we going to do about it? And who cares, right? So this is an emerging business opportunity. Anytime there's a problem and if there's money to be made off of it, why not combine the two, bring a solution, everyone gets paid, everyone's happy, and we save the planet. So for me, a great leading indicator is when Lockheed Martin sees money somewhere, we know that that's good. And I think it was actually Joe Sexton, who we just heard from there, who sent me this article. And I was like, ah, thank goodness. It's not just Andrew crying this out loud. It's Lockheed Martin. And what this tells me also, and this is probably music to both Joe and Thea's ears, is the atmospherics for investment are good now. This would indicate that there's going to be an opportunity for not only Lockheed Martin and other associated funds to come in here, but other people are going to start seeing the dollar signs and supporting this. And we'll get to some later slides, but this is absolutely the case. And Lockheed Martin also, if you read through these articles and some of their other thinking, they view wildfires as a national security risk. In I do track what they call hot shots. Those are your wildfire fighters in the emergency services universe. That is the one sector that I track very closely and support quite a bit. This year, the vast majority of wildfires in the United States were human caused, whether inadvertent or arson. And that's just domestic. And I think about where we are in the world and how unstable things are, that if our adversaries wanted to use fire as a sabotage methodology, if they were able to use some of these predictive maps, understand which way the wind's blowing, what could be at risk, it could be devastating. And this isn't just theoretical. If you think about Chile and what happened down there to that resort community, um, we're not sure who started the fire or why. There's certainly some supposition, but at the four corners of the city, they started wildfires to burn the entire city down and get people out of there. So fire is a weapon, and Lockheed Martin understanding this is a national security risk, I really do appreciate them going that way. And here's the affirmation. This is the Department of Homeland Security. The Office of Science and Technology is now looking for all types of solutions in the variety of different ways that we can then address the fire weather. Actually, let me move my slide up here. And here, if you go through, and I'll share again after this is all over, I'll go through the links. I'll share links with all you. But each one of these, if you click on that, it shows you a drop down of all the technology the United States government is looking for. And going back to the atmospherics are good for private equity, venture funds for this. Also, emergency management. So if we think about this as another area or a different bucket that we don't typically go to for investment dollars, those emergency management dollars, remediation, the restoration, the mitigation dollars. I think Joe and Thea and anyone else who's listening to this this broadcast, you should think about how do we position ourselves to take advantage of that, because yeah, we all want to be compensated for the work we do, but we're also saving lives. We're saving buildings. We're really doing something as a benefit here, and if we can do it through a risk management, emergency management lens, for me that's a hand in glove fit. I really enjoy thinking about that. But Department of Homeland Security recognizes that this is kind of the dual devastation that can happen after fire weather. There was something called the Grizzly Creek Fire, and it burned the Glenwood Canyon in Colorado back in August of 2020. And the fire was finally extinguished in December. But what happened was when fire burns through the ground, it creates sort of a waxy hard surface on that soil, the top layer. You can imagine if fire's on top of the ground, yeah, it's going to get harder. But what happens then is seeds have a hard time penetrating and getting purchase within that soil. So any kind of reseeding they wanted to do after this fire, they couldn't do it because the ground was so hard. And then the monsoons came and they washed all that land away, and it knocked out Highway 70, which for those of you like Thea who might not know, that is a major interstate across the United States. And when that got knocked out by the floods, again, think back, it wasn't necessarily the flood, it was the fire before that we were unable to provide remediation about. The damage not only was to the highway, but that's the Colorado River down there on the far right-hand side, which is another major waterway in the United States. They predict it's going to take 7 years for that silt and sediment to clear out of there and restore it back to the way it was as a native trout stream. So the layered devastation that occurs from just one fire is just going to knock the entire ecosystem out of balance. So what do we do about it? I had Steve Wolf, who runs Team Wildfire, reached out to me a few years ago and said, Andrew, I've got this killer invention. I'm trying to raise money for it. Can you help me out? And I'm like, well, tell me more about you. And if you've ever seen a movie that has pyrotechnics and things explode or fire shoots out of something or someone shoots a firearm or something like that, Steve Wolf is that guy. He's the pyrotechnic guy from movies, and he's engineered all kinds of killer special effects using fire and flammable things. But what he discovered was the same techniques he uses to make fire can also extinguish those fires. So he has pioneered putting jet turbine engines onto vehicles, so he can do a variety of things when a fire occurs. And this is a few of these things, blowing the fuel away, also putting water through it or some sort of chemical retardant, using these types of things. So far to date, he's raised $3.7 million for his company. I'd love to get him on one of these calls and do an interview with him because he is absolutely fascinating. But he's often on CNN or all the other channels giving his expert opinions as well. But I like to see these opportunities there, utilizing something that was maybe meant for something else, and now we can cross apply it to helping out in the wildfire world. This is one that I picked up just reading the going through just doing a Google search, but I know there's a lot of different types of companies out there that are utilizing AI and other methodologies, basically taking the same satellite feeds that Joe gets or Dr. Hobbins gets and applying some sort of prompt or query filter to it to try and get to where that is. I'm kind of on the fence about things like that. I think that we've got enough existing tools to do that. And I really, anyway, I will leave my thoughts there. But going back here to Joe's company, and Joe, why is the T lowercase? Oh, you're muted. I'm sorry, I muted you there, buddy.
All right, can you hear me now?
I got you now. So why is that T lowercase? I remember you told me one time.
You want the real reason or you want the joke?
Well, the joke first and the real reason.
We never took capital. The real reason is just like we all started as coders, and that's the way that we're used to typing words. Like you don't get a space. I guess we could have put a space in it, but some compilers don't like those. Anyway, so trying to get to 8 billion compilers, we want to make sure that we're general.
And when, I can't recall how we first met, but the first time I really dug into what you're doing was when I was tracking the saltwater intrusion issue on the East Coast and understanding why these ghost forests are popping up amongst trees that were in the coastal and Piedmont communities. Are you doing anything in the fire weather predictive side of things now? I seem to think that you might be, or that could be an angle that you're pursuing.
Not fire weather.
Or
So
flash
actually,
droughts.
yeah. And so now I'm like on the ghost forest thing. I'm wrapping up a project with USGS right now for the entire Delmarva Peninsula, looking at wetland change over the past 40 years. But for fire, if I can share my screen, I'll show you what
Hang on a second.
It's, I can come up with 1,000 words, but a picture would be easier on
There you
everyone
go.
else. Let's see. Hold on.
And while he's doing this, I'm going to let everyone know here. When I did an entire symposium on saltwater intrusion, and Joe was sitting in the back typing on his computer, and then he types, and he goes, oh my gosh, look at this. And he turns it around, and everyone in the room went, oh, this is worse than we thought.
Yeah, it's like we can see it. Not like all right, so this is the NASA project that is just ending. And so when TerraPulse makes data sets for a client, we deliver it via SFTP, the old-fashioned way, via API, and then we just sort of have this as our sort of development back and forth so that we can co-develop. Actually, I can show you eco stress data. it's kind of gnarly, right? Like this is an experimental thermal sensor bolted to the International Space Station, and then they hire us to like say, okay, do stuff with it. And well, actually, what we did was we have the equivalent of Fitbits on mountain lions and mule deer and GPS collars, and so we're trying to see how the effects of climate change, the stresses from climate change, propagate through ecosystems. One way is to the herbivores and the carnivores. The other way, the ultimate herbivore, is fire. And so like the fire risk data sets that I talked about, here we go. So fire hazard. Uh, okay, so biomass, right? Like it's something's got to burn.
Are you
Um,
sharing?
oh, I thought it was.
No.
Was. Ah,
But
all right.
it was a good verbal description.
Oh, okay, let me try it again. There you go. How's that? You seeing that?
Yep, there you go. All right, cool. So I'm seeing looks like Nevada and
Utah.
Utah.
Yeah. So, okay. So every time we do a project, we do one of these, uh, and so this is basically it, right? So, okay. Uh, this was the thing that sort of made my name in academic circles. This is global tree cover every year, um, updated by satellite imagery. We can do it at 30-meter resolution. We can do it at 10-meter resolution, right? And so you can see stuff like that. I've never zoomed in on this place before. So if it goes south, well, it's data. Uh, and so the way that we do this is every pixel is a probability density function. And the way we do change detection is essentially just a significance test uh, on, before and after. So there's 2020, there's 2021. And let's see if I captured that, detected that as a loss, right? So there's a loss, right? So we monitor ecosystems by these maps of variables that are relevant to some use or interpretation. Then backward through time, we can look at changes in those tracking variables. Now, and we can do this over the entire planet. That's a hurricane and salvage logging after the hurricane. And let's
And that's
go
an
one.
important note. While you're going through, I'm going to discuss that. When Hurricane Matthew rolled through Florida, it caused a lot of tree fall in the northern part of the state. The next year, that's where the fires burned through. If you think about Helene and what it did to North Carolina, I saw some satellite images of the tree down. I mean, it's certainly we talk a lot about the flooding and the devastation there, but the amount of trees that are laying on the ground right now is significant. And, again, predictors here, I would think next year is going to get pretty hot there in that part of the country.
Yeah, yeah, and like it's tied in with like forestry. It's tied in with climate. So salvage crews have to be able to get in there. It's far more complex than just the physics and the ecology. There's economics and there's social science. Like there's all sorts of things that go into sort of impinge on this. But the way we do this is every pixel is a probability, and the more we know, that probability density function just changes and shrinks and shrinks. And if we know everything, then it becomes a single value and we can track changes. We never know everything. There's always a spread, right? So everything that I'm showing you here on the back end is a probability function. So that's the vegetation productivity, another index that's daily. So every day going back, this is probably 20 years, right? So this was a pine forest. Every year, very little amplitude in the year. It's just sort of a flat cycle. And then on September 21st, 2018, the hurricane hit, knocked out, looks like about half of the tree canopy cover. In the subsequent year, you got like a flush of the deciduous. That's your sweet gum, your maple, your hickories, things like that. And then it sort of bopped along. If I was to find an older one, it would show kind of more of that. But
Joe,
let's
while you're talking about the trees, what do you think about black locust?
I've tried to buy it for fence posts in my yard so I don't have arsenic leaching into my soil. It grows slow, it's hard as nails. I wish there was more of it. But there's only like a couple nurseries in like Tennessee that sell it. Why do you ask?
It grows by rhizome too. If you want some, I've got plenty.
Oh, all right. Yeah, I
I
might
was
actually.
yeah, I'll get you some. I can easily get you some saplings. I was backpacking earlier this year in the James River, and I was backpacking in a burn scar that was 2 years old. It was interesting
Huh?
to see what came back after that burn scar, and it was black locust and sassafras were the top two trees I saw everywhere, and it's because they're rhizomes. And they probably got
Yeah.
tons of carbon. The soil got warm. They popped up. The other tree that didn't even look like a fire came through were the hickories. I was stunned by how hardy they were and the hickory nuts. So there are tons of little seedlings popping up, as well as the hickories. The oaks and maples, they had sprouts coming out of the roots for the most part. The one that really kind of distressed me, though, the mountain laurels and rhododendrons, there was nothing 2 years later.
Huh.
So I'm assuming it was all the oil they have in their leaves really must have cooked them at that point in time, all the
Yeah,
way down to their
advanced
roots.
Edens. Yeah, it's so like the eastern deciduous forest is currently undergoing a species shift from like oak hickory domination to maple domination because we've shifted from fire as our primary like large scale disturbance to white-tailed deer.
Ooh.
So like acorns are delicious, right? If you were to like try to predict where to find white-tailed deer, and I do, uh uh the the in September and October, deer are under oaks and hickories. They're eating all the acorns. If you have too many deer, you basically have this like Old Testament like uh, warfare of deer on. So basically, we're getting species changes. Um, anyway, hold on. Let me boy, when you get the two of us together. All right, so fire. So I showed you that we can map tree cover and we can map deforestation and we can map reforestation. When we go to the eastern United States, you see harvests, right? Southeast pine forest harvest. Farther south, you can see hurricanes. You come over to the west, it's not a lot of harvests. I can show you there are clear cuts in there, right? But the big disturbances, the big movements of carbon, those are fires. That is paradise. That's the Oroville Dam Complex, most expensive disaster in California history. This is Redding. Keep going up the Cascades. This is why I have started Nomadic, so I can show people the scale at which these disturbances are happening. Just pure raw. Let people know what's going on. There's the Willamette Valley. Uh, okay, so an illustrative case is the Olympic Peninsula. Um, so we can switch this into evergreen fractions, deciduous fractions, basically all of these variables that are predictive of fire and fire behavior. Uh, I can go back through the entire history of forests and see the this is a map of the most recent detected clear cut, right? So when the canopy dropped below, I think this is 30% cover, we flag it as a cut, and then we subtract that year from the current year, and now we have the age of, well, the disturbance age of the forest. Some of it grew back, some of it didn't. This is now a map of the age of the forest. And if I go over very large areas, I get what foresters call an age class distribution, right? So that's an age class distribution. That, me in undergrad, that is a lifetime of field work. And I just gave it to you guys at the click of a button, right? So there's the current tree cover. That's 2020, so I did an old one. And there's the age of the forest going into the past. So that's important for forestry right now. Like because they do projection models. A forest that is 25 years old this year will be 26 years old next year. The value changes, like, and you can apply yield tables and basically, what's it called? What insurance companies do.
Oh, risk
I
management.
don't know, well, demography. Basically, just
Mm.
doing demography models to think of like so. So the reason that we were looking at those hurricanes in the southeast is for a professor at the North Carolina wants to know the impact of hurricanes on the projected timber supply in the future, right? Anyway, so to get to fire, we can take all those data, and there are many, many in the background. The one that I showed you, the time series, all these things, feed them to machine learning, and then produce maps of biomass. right? So over very large areas. And we can look at maps of changes in biomass. So let me give a year where I know that there was a change. So a way to be an informed consumer of remote sensing, especially surface remote sensing, is can you see the images, that the boundaries between the images in the map, right? And so my lab at the University of Maryland solved this problem in like 2010 with the probability density functions. But the other way is to see if the map flickers when you look at 2 points in time. And so this map, let's go out a little bit. There we go. Now it's drawing. So this map is not flickering, right? So
And I mean, just for the folks out there listening to this, the reason biomass matters, if you think back to this past spring, it was inordinately wet in California. People were celebrating the reservoirs getting filled up. And for someone like me, I was terrified because what that means is going to be tons of vegetative growth and it's going to get dry. So all the fuel will be just sitting there on the ground that can then enhance or amplify the impact of these fires. I assume that's what you're going to be talking about.
yeah, and I just put in a map of surface water just to make things prettier. Uh, so notice where this map does flicker, right? Those are fires, right? So now we know that we can see all these covariates or all these predictors of what could draw a fire or could support a fire, and we can see fires. So we can take those two things, combine them, feed them to basically the same remote sensing or the machine learning architecture, and spit out a prediction of this is the probability of fire over these states, and this is for 2021, given the fuels and the topography, right? And then if we add in, and this is this is either an average or a sum through the year, right? It's an annual summary of that. And we can update that with the new satellite imagery, right? Danger is, oh, we also got Idaho for that one. So danger brings in some meteorology. And there's the fire weather index is kind of what we use. It's basically the first principal component of like the of the atmospheric effect on fire, which is it's vapor pressure deficit, atmospheric water demand. Now, what's cool is this is business opportunities. So like right here, you've got um, anybody that doesn't want a fire can like sort of has some micro interest in this, right? Even up to larger insurance companies have an interest in it. Biomass investors do not currently, according to
Well, I
my.
mean, people like Thea would have an interest in this. I mean, we'll get to her in a minute, but she's doing the remediation part. So she's going to
Yes,
need to
right.
know what to put in there, when to do it, where to do it,
Yeah, don't go
things like
somewhere,
that.
right? I talked to an investor of an investor in carbon markets who puts his own money and his friends' money into carbon investments several years ago, and we were talking about he's got all these quants on his team and everything, and I was like, okay, so your business model is you look for opportunities, places to put carbon or to put carbon, you harvest the credits. Um, let Can you figure out a way to short stupid carbon? Right? Because there's a lot of people putting trees where trees aren't. You can't put a tree where a tree already is. Well, has anyone asked why the tree's not there? Uh, that is this map, right? Like this is the probability of fire times the biomass, which makes expected loss, value at risk, right? So this map gives us this is the expected loss of biomass. How much biomass is there times the probability of it burning? Expected loss. You can do much more complicated models, but that's at the heart of them. You want to map the probability of loss and the probability of and the fact that it's there.
That is incredible. Just for
Severity.
time's sake, I'm just going
Sure,
to
go ahead.
take the share back here. But that, I mean, I could sit here and listen to this thing for freaking hours. This is killer.
Okay, yeah. So go ahead.
Yeah, no worries, my friend. Thank you so much for that. So, there we go. To our friend here from Romania, I am very excited to introduce Thea as well. And Thea is someone who reached out to me on LinkedIn a while back. I can't remember what the premise of reaching out to me was, but we started some conversations. I was really taken with her way of approaching different problem sets, as well as her agility to move around a little bit. The initial premise of her company Prune was pruning. I mean, tree trimming, things like that. And I'm thinking, boy, for mitigation purposes, that is important. And then she said, oh, but wait a minute, I've got something I haven't talked about yet. Thea, if you do feel comfortable, discussing this, please unmute yourself and let us know what you can let us know. And also congratulations again for being the person that the Romanian government selected to come to Select USA Investors Summit this past year too. That's a huge congratulations there for that.
Appreciate that, Andrew, and thank you again for every opportunity that you provide and facilitate to move this forward, because it's a hugely impactful segment, especially in terms of restoration and recovery. Thank you, Joe, for what you presented. Honestly, this is one of the aspects that Andrew and we nerded out on the data side and on impact and all these layers and layers of data that we can actually look at and get a lot of juicy insight from. One of our segments is tackling restoration after natural disasters. And Andrew and I were speaking a lot on the specifically on wildfire. And a part of our technology focuses a lot on restoration and recovery, especially on areas of preserving the natural biodiversity. And I heard you earlier saying that, about species that aren't meant to be in a specific place. So that's why we're focusing on conserving species that are meant to be there. One of the aspects that our technology really improves on is the native species hello there. For areas that have been affected by wildfire. This is why we are focusing a lot on biodiversity right now, and not just planting trees for the sake of trying to restore forests that have previously been there before disaster stroke. We are complementing those species with species that are meant to be there, that are meant to maintain moisture in the soil. And I've invited Stefan, who is my co-founder. He's the technical part of PruneTag right now, because we've never had him on one of these calls before. And I was so happy that he could make it this time. And he has a great aspect. I'm happy you mentioned the black locust earlier, Andrew, because Stefan made a few tests, and one of our core species is the black locust because of its properties and resilience. So Stefan, please share with us the juicy insight.
Hello, hi everybody. Nice meeting you. I was really, when I listened to everything, I was like listening to a new lesson for me, because this is a problem that even we discussed about. When I dive into solving a problem, I really want to dive into solving a problem, and you discussed a lot of topics that are of interest to us in the future and also in present. And yeah, starting with black locust, I really like talking about black locust tree, because it's especially in agroforestry in Romania, it's a very good tree used for a lot of purposes. And you are talking also about deers. I've seen deers eating the flowers of black locust, and they have like this mature period of the first 5-6 years when they have the thorns and nothing will eat them. But after 5-6 years they mature and the bark will change, the problem is the bark. When the bark changes, it becomes a little more flammable, but the tree retains a lot of water, so it's very hard to burn it entirely and to propagate the fire. Also, in this area in Romania, we have very few wildfires because the way the forests are natural forests are separated. We have the lower forests that where we don't have necessarily pine trees or conifer tree, because the conifer tree is the one that will spread faster because of the resin. We have trees it's hard to remember the name, but we have some leafy trees that they also retain a lot of water, and they have a very small bark, and they don't become fuel for the fire. And also I was thinking about some species that might help as a barrier for fires, like alder tree. The alder tree, it's a water loving tree, and when it starts to suck the water out of the land, it can be also a little invasive, but you can burn alder tree in a wildfire. That's something that I've seen. It's very hard to, and even if you burn it, the next year it will sprout immediately right next to it. So it's amazing talking about biodiversity, because the way we want to use it is to also address different situations, different scenarios, and if we want to help, because also black locust trees is really good for sustaining the soil, for keeping the soil there, and that's how it was introduced in Romania, like especially when we had a lot of new highways. It was always on the on the left of the highway, so we don't have rocks and land coming on the highway. So yes, it's a good tree for stabilizing the terrain. Me, I haven't talked, but I'm a water engineer. Besides that, I have the degree in robotics and automation. So we're introducing new type of trees in lands that, as Joe said, it's not necessarily, I mean, it's not a place that your normal sea trees. It's sometimes related to the fact that the water on the surface, or the quantity, it's always very limited. So you can't introduce a water loving tree in a place that doesn't have any water. So yeah, I mean, the soil assessment, the everything assessment needs to be done accordingly, so you don't make this type of tree plantations that will die in the next years. So yeah, that's what you're focusing on. And sorry, I will stop a little, maybe have another discussion at some point with both of you, because yeah, I like the dynamic of here.
It's easy to nerd out on the technical part. Yeah, Joe.
How do you determine the site suitability for the species? How do you predict it?
It's most of the, let's say, it's related to the altitude and the terrain and water. And also you can address the microbiome that existed there and be more scientific. You can watch the microbiome to determine what type of microbiome was developed there, because we had scenarios when in 1950s we had different forests, and they cut the entire forest and replanted with pine trees because they wanted to produce timber. But the pine trees, they won't adjust that good to the soil. So ideal, when you make conservation, you always want to think before what was there and go to the archives. And we have a lot of collaborators that are doing this to help us determine what was existing there and what we changed, because we changed it, the biodiversity and the whole area suffered in a way that it shouldn't.
What do you use to represent water in that decision?
It's
Data,
It's basically
I'm
soil
thinking data.
assessment. It's basically soil assessment because and depth of water, and of course it's
So
also
you visit the sites individually and do a soil
yeah,
core.
yeah, because
Okay.
it's yeah, that's the main way to do it. Otherwise, there aren't any type of studies that you can address it or you can use. Yeah, that's the simplest way to do it, to go from above. If it's on a slope or it's a land, try to move to the first or to the first level of the first water level and see what's the depth. And of course, when you're talking about evaporation, you can also understand like how fast will evaporate, because yeah, that's also important.
There's a data set called soil grids. It's a global soil database gridded. So basically the longest running complaint of vegetation ecologists is soil data. Like it's like if you were to look at the discussion section of my generation of vegetation ecologists, there's always a paragraph or at least a sentence in there where we complain and we blame the lack of good soil data for our variance in our estimates. Just like you can rubber stamp it. But there is this soil grids. I think it's a nonprofit, but what they're doing is trying to digitize the world's soil data sets. I think that that's a great thing to do. It's going to be a very slow climb for them, but they do have data sets online, so something to look into.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah,
Thanks for that.
thanks.
And if there's anything in particular that you want, let me know what it is, and I'll try to put it on Nomadic so that you can just like look at it.
Absolutely. That sounds like really useful information for us. And I really feel like it's highly complementary because, and I feel like this is kind of Andrew's magic here in the works, that these technologies complement so much that individually they have their own impact and of course value, though together it would be even more powerful and more efficient, I think, especially considering the areas that we're focusing on. So soil quality and soil health has significantly changed in the past year, especially given all the weather changes and natural disasters happening. So I think this is an element that we have to consider when we're assessing and when we are considering doing the actual reforestation with those species, with the seeds especially, because seeds that have been native to a specific area are now in danger of being altered in their development.
Right. Yeah, and most of the predictive mapping of where species should go is done on climate data. And
Yeah.
the fact is the most things can live in most places if you give them soil and water. It's like right, it's there like there's such the soil and the water balance is such a gigantic missing piece that the climate it gives you an R squared of like 35%, right? So you're not even getting half of the variance.
This is one of the aspects that I noticed is a plus for the technology that we provide, that and I've heard it so many times in the past few months coming from people. Yeah, but doesn't nature regenerate anyway? It does, sure it does, except when it's under so much stress, considering all these extra conditions from flash droughts and actual fires, it can't regenerate that fast. So the technology that we're providing is definitely going to provide a boost to the restoration and recovery part of the actual ecosystem.
Woohoo. Thank you. Thank you guys for being here, like not only here, but being in existence on this planet. I mean, you're the heroes our time needs right now. I mean, this is it. This is when we put our capes on and go outside, you know? So let's say you're listening to this, you're like, oh crap, what do I do? Fires are coming to the East Coast. Well, thank goodness our government has put out this website called livingwithfire.org. You can go to this little handy dandy schematic here and figure out where your highest risk for fire is. And I'm not going to go through click these little buttons because this is a graphic and not a user interface. But should you look at the house, where do most fires start? They start on the roof. They start from an ember blowing over and hitting the roof, where in the crevices, in those little corners where the roof meets the chimney or something, there can be some sort of accumulation of pine needles or leaves. That is the spot where most fires and embers will drop and ignite. Also, the gutters are another big spot. And you want to have a 6-foot barrier around your house. You want to trim your trees, blah, blah, blah. All the things that you think about. You don't want to have your firewood stacked next to your back door in case a fire comes through there. The reason this is important is not only saving your structure, but if, let's say, we have a finite amount of firefighters, of hot shots, of wildfire fighters. If they have to go and deploy a massive amount of resources to save one dwelling, those are resources that you're not going to have on the front line. The more you can do to make their jobs easier, so they can go and focus their attention and energies on places they need to be rather than trying to save your house, the better it is for those wildfire fighters. 1/3 of all the houses in the US sit in a wildfire zone. So this is something that as citizens, we really need to take to heart and go out there and make sure that our homes are safe. And again, preserve that time. Let those emergency management folks get to where they need to be rather than trying to save your dwelling because you didn't take the time to clean the pine needles off the roof or clean your gutters or take your firewood away from the house. There's another really good site as well, website to go to ensure that your home or your dwelling has been remediated against the best of your abilities to prevent this fire. But please do your part. Please support your hot shots. Please support your firefighters. If there's ever a local ordinance or a bond being raised to support firefighters, please support that. Vote for that. Trust me, these are the people that you don't want to see, but when you see them, you're very happy you see them. And last but not least, here's me. If you want to find out more about me, here's some of my mad ramblings in the form of LinkedIn posts. You can go there. As Thea and Joe know, I do tend to speak truth to power from time to time, and I feel very comfortable doing so. And I also feel very comfortable promoting my friends who are doing really good things for this planet. So I appreciate Joe and Thea and Stefan, and Charles has been kind of quiet over there, so he may or may not be listening at this point in time, but I appreciate him being here at least and showing moral support. Oh, he is here.
I have been. I wouldn't leave you, Andrew.
Oh, you're the best, buddy.
Yeah.
And we do have your jacket as well. We'll make sure that you get that back. So appreciate you.
Don't sweat the jacket.
Leaving that there. Anyway, well, thank you again for joining us. This recording will be made available later. And if you're listening to this recording right now, obviously you've realized that as well. And have yourselves a wonderful day. And thank you again for letting me talk about a topic that I am just absolutely fascinated with. And it's good having as Thea said, a few of our mutual nerds on the phone so we can all nerd out on this thing.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. It's been great.
Thank you for putting it
Thea,
together.
Stefan, Charles.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Pleasure
Nice
was
to
mine.
meet you. Yeah.